All right, in this video, I'm going to give a demonstration of various topics and just the entire process of getting started with your 3D layout animation. So I'm not actually going to be doing any character animation or anything like that. What I am going to be doing is going from having nothing created for my actual shots or scene files and go from there into setting up a Maya file for all of my shots and my animation and putting in a placeholder environment and props and all that other stuff. So first of all, before we continue, I'm going to delete this, which was just there for the thumbnail. And I just want to give a little recap here of what I have already. So I do have a whole project folder made, as you should already have too when you're doing this. I did also create my character that I'm going to put in. So I have a character and I have a pre-made camera that I can just import in. So I made a camera with an aim constraint on it already, and I won't have to make that again. And I also have my main character, not all the characters. And so I've set my project, and that's pretty much all I have. So first things first, before you start putting geometry and cameras in your scenes and saving them, there's a few things we need to talk about. So item number one is that you need to make sure that you have a shot list. This is just an example one that I made for something else. But you want to make sure that you've gone through either your storyboards, if it's something that you're making yourself, or if it's something that's based off of another clip, you want to go through both the storyboards and the video itself. I seem to have closed my video without paying attention. I have a little video that's a clip. Oh my gosh, that was loud. I have a little video here from Willow. That is kind of my idea for my scene. And so what I would have done is kind of broken it down. So like, okay, shot one, it's Val Kilmer hiding behind a barrel with arrows getting shot at him. Shot two, close-up of these henchmen getting shot by Val Kilmer. Shot three, close-up of Val Kilmer reloading and then throwing his crossbow away. Shot four, a medium shot. And so each one of these little moments where the camera changes is, in my version of layout anyway, going to be an entirely new Maya scene unless I make an executive decision to put multiple actions in the same shot. So for example, these two shots right here, this one and this one, could definitely be the same Maya file because all I'm really doing is moving from one camera to the next with the same action happening in both shots. With these other shots, it's not one continuous action, you know. This shot here is a direct continuation of the first shot. There's been some time passing in between. And, you know, Val Kilmer, or just my main character in general, will be in a different place behind the barrel, and I could move him. So again, you know, you have to decide which shots are the same file and which shots are not the same file. But the point is that you can't just blindly go in and start making your entire animation in one Maya scene without breaking it down first. Okay, so there's that. Another thing that I did before I jump into this is I made myself a little map, and I just drew this in Photoshop, and this is based off of me looking over my video clip carefully and trying to place what this set looks like by piecing together where things are in different parts of the animation. So basically, you know, main character is behind this barrel. I am guessing the barrel's about this far away from the gate. there's a gate that's about this wide, and people are fitting through it, and there's an outside, and then this dragon comes out of a little, or kind of a big puddle, actually, behind the main character, and then he runs out the gate with the henchmen. And some of these other things are just kind of other features that are in the shot, but aren't necessarily like, they're not things that the characters interact with, but they're good landmarks. So there's this tower directly behind the dragon. There's like these two pillars or towers right around the gate, which I drew kind of, probably those would be closer to the gate in my drawing if I did it correctly. You know, I can see how wide the gate is because of how many people can fit through it at any given time. So I'm going to use that to kind of build a placeholder version of my environment, because, you know, I don't have a separate environmental modeling department to make that for me. I'm making it myself. So first things first, you don't want to import, you know, I'm starting with a new scene here, and I don't want to import my main character, because if I import my character, when I go back later to change it, you know, whether that's texturing and editing the shader or adjusting the rig, I would have to re-import it, and when you re-import something, it's completely brand new, and none of the animation would stay on it. So what I'm going to do, even this early in the process, is I'm going to File, and I'm going to say Create Reference. And it's going to look for my, in my Scenes folder, and I'm going to find the most recent version of my character. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about something else related to this and keeping organized with this in a second, but let's just do this for now. And if you're wondering why the student version came up twice, it's actually because the bottle mesh is a referenced file into another file, and that's where I rigged it. And then, so now I'm by, you know, just by stacking references, I'm technically referencing in two other files, just the model and then the model with a rig on it. Anyway, so we can go back after we're done here and see how I could update my reference later, but for now we'll just put that in there. And I'm also going to import my camera, and this one I am going to import because I doubt that I'm going to make any changes to the way that this camera is designed, or I might even make a new camera entirely within this scene. So I'm really just going to import that one because, unlike my character, I don't plan on needing to swap it out with an updated version at a later time. Now, it's not really going to be possible to set up our scene unless we have some sort of environment. So I'm going to just kind of make a very fast blocked environment here, and keep in mind that I haven't actually saved this file yet, but keep in mind that we want to reference in the environment as well. So I'm going to have to make the environment originally in some scene, obviously, and it might as well just be this one, but after that we are going to have to kind of save out the environment placeholder as a reference, and then bring in that reference as the actual environment instead of the one that I built directly in here. So let's just see what I'm talking about. So if I look at my map, which if I wanted to, I could create a free image plane and load in that image. Not gonna lie, I just accidentally clicked that one button the first try without attempting to. And I'm holding down the J key in order to rotate this in increments of 15 degrees. Now, it doesn't really matter, but I do kind of want my environment to be set up. How did you get backwards? I do want my text to be on top. That would be nice. You should be 90. You should be nothing. There we go. I do want my text to be the right way forward. But if I look down at my compass, you know, Z should probably be in this direction, and X should probably be this direction, and obviously Y should be up. So that's what I'm going to do. And if I want to get some good use out of this, I might as well make it remotely the same scale. And if I wanted to, I could also technically go into my attribute editor and reduce the gain a little bit on that so that it's not as eye melting. And I will grab my character here and rotate them forward just for posterity. All right, so I'm going to make my placeholder environment, and this is going to be very, very basic for the time being anyway. Sometimes I like to go into the inputs to edit that rather than scaling, but it seems as though I can only change those inputs up to 100. So scaling it is. And remember, this is a placeholder, so I will be aware as I'm making this that some things will not be 100% accurate. But I want to get, ooh, those two things are exactly on top of each other right now, which is not really what I want. I can turn on X-ray mode there to see under there. So I need a barrel. That's an important feature. Why is that an important feature? Because it is a big landmark in several of my shots that my character is hiding behind, so that is an important enough feature that it needs to be in the placeholder. And I'm really going to go very, very low detail with my environment for this. I am kind of a stickler. I mean, I like to make things detailed when I can, so I'll at least put in enough edges to kind of make this look like a barrel, but even that is kind of unnecessary for this part of the process, but it's easy enough, so I'm going to do it. So I have barrel. I do need to have some indication of the gate, which is a very important feature of my animation, since people are constantly running through it, and I see it in the background a lot. Now, again, I may have to adjust actually how tall this gate is, but I'm going to just kind of make what I think it looks like for now. And it doesn't hurt to always be checking your reference. So I can see that it is an arched gate, and it is pretty thick. So those are just some little observations you can make about your placeholders. I don't know if I care too much about the arch, but I mean, I do for the final version, but for this one, I'm going to make a very basic archway, and what I'm going to do for that is just delete some edges in there and kind of just make it look like that. And I don't, I wouldn't even really need to bridge these, but every time I say I'm not going to do something, I do apparently, so I'm going to bridge them. Beauty, except for that part. Not you. Bye. I don't care. I don't care about smoothing this right now. So there's my gate. I can adjust a little bit if I want. And I am going to just plop in a few more details here, at least the things that I drew in my map, because I bothered to draw them, so I might as well put them in. I'm just going to have this thing kind of like here, and this thing over here, and I'll put another one in the back, kind of like over here-ish, and make that one a little bit taller. Now for my little pond, I'll probably just make a disk. And I can do a little bit of stylizing on that to make it look more pondy. And I'll probably extrude my entire thing up, which doesn't really make sense since it's supposed to be a lake or a body of water, but I'm going to do it because visually it makes it easier to spot. And last but not least, I might just put in that staircase that's over there, which you can spot a few times in the movie clip. So over here, I'm gonna snap it. And that's good enough for me. All right, so the idea here is that if I was going to start laying out my shots, now when I go to look in my camera, which currently is below the ground, I'm going to go to panels, go to layouts, and make this 2 panes side by side. You can stay as that one. You can be perspective. And from my perspective view is where I will move my camera. Oh, that's why it's inside the barrel. The idea is that when I start lining up my shots, I have enough information to actually know, identify this as a scene. So if I go back to shot 1, I could try copying this camera angle. This is kind of a weird aspect ratio, this actual footage. This looks kind of like it is letterboxed, but that's not that's neither here nor there. So I'd want to make sure that I can get those camera angles before I start doing anything. Because if you're trying to line up the camera angles on a blank environment, then you're going to be, you're not really going to be making the right calls on things. Now, once I have this placeholder environment in, I don't even necessarily need to keep this in here. So if I wanted to, I could delete this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab everything that I just made, and I am going to delete the history on that stuff, and probably freeze transforms too, even though that's kind of unnecessary in this instance. I am going to group these. What is this polycylinder? Oh, duh, I forgot the barrel. I'm just going to grab everything from the outliner, and I'm going to group them, and we'll call this environment, or I will completely misspell it. That could work too. Environment placeholder, and I'm going to file, export selection, and I'm going to export that as my ASCII. So this will be exported out as its own MA file, and I can put that into my scenes folder and call this environment placeholder. Apparently somebody outside is yelling right now. Interesting. If you ever get this message that says that a file contains unknown nodes or data, you can go to File, Optimize Scene Size, and make sure that unknown nodes is turned on. I believe that came up because my character was made when Mental Ray existed, and now it no longer exists, and it didn't like those nodes being on there. Maybe I'll spell it right this time. There we go. Now, this is going to sound crazy, but what I'm actually going to do is I am going to delete that thing that I just spent all that time modeling. after I saved out the other file, of course. And the reason that I deleted that is because I want to now immediately bring it back in to my scene, but this time being referenced from that that file that we just exported. So if I go to File, Create Reference, and bring in that, there it is again, except now it's a reference. So when if I want to make the actual model of this rather than the placeholder version, I can do all those changes in the other file, overwrite the old file, and then bring in all this new updated environment will appear in every single one of my files in which it is a reference. Speaking of which, now that you have at least this much done to start your layout, what you're probably going to want to do is just kind of go through and save out a bunch of separate Maya scenes. So I'm going to say Command S here, and I'm going to say I want to save this as shot 010, and I'm going to use that naming convention because if I need to add in like up in between shot, I could make this 015, and it would still be before shot 2020. But I'll name this 010 VO1.ma and hit save as. I'm getting a lot. If you get a lot of those messages, you can just hold down Enter, and they will all go away. As we will see in a second, because now this is going to sound a little odd, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to keep saving as, and normally I'd hit the hotkey, except apparently that actually closes my screen recording software if I hit Command Shift S, so not going to do that. And this one will be shot 2. Oh, I just told you to hold down Enter, and then I forgot to do it. This one will be shot 3. And I'm not going to literally go through each one and do that, but now if we go back to our scenes folder, we will have a one version of all of our shots saved. And the idea is that once you make them all, and they all have the character in them, they all have the environment referenced in, and they all have a camera. And after that, you go back and you start setting up the individual camera and any rough animation for that shot. And you don't have to erase any animation because your first instinct may be just work on shot 1 and then save as that and save it as version 2, except now in version 2, you're going to have to delete all the animation and camera stuff that you just did in shot 1. This way, they're all basically starting from the same starting point, which is this. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, I'm going to take a second and talk about referencing. So I made a few errors when I was referencing that I was conscious about at the time, but I didn't explain them. And there are two things that are related. One is that I am putting all my scenes into my scenes folder without organizing them, and I don't have any props, so I'm gonna have to model props, and I may make like an updated version of my character, and that's gonna go in here, and then all the versions of my shots. So my scenes folder is going to become extremely cluttered and unorganized very soon if I don't address this early on. So you do have the freedom to make folders within your default project folders. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a folder called References. I'm going to make a folder called Animation. And I'm going to make a folder called Edits. Or maybe I'll call this like Assets. Again, these aren't, I'm not saying copy these names exactly, but what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to close this scene because you shouldn't move files around while they're open. That's bad. So I'm going to put environment placeholder into assets. I'm going to put these into animation. I'm going to put these also into assets. and I'll put camera in there too. So nothing's currently in references, and we'll see why. Animation, here's this, and within that I can say shot 01, shot 02, shot 03, etc. And put those in there. So you're allowed to do this because as long as you are putting everything within the project folder that has this same workspace.mel folder, or sorry, file, this is what's going to remind Maya where everything is. So as long as you set your project and you're always staying within the same project folder, then even if you put things into custom subfolders, it will still remember where they are whenever you go to a new computer or whatever, as long as you set your project before you open them. So why did I make this references folder that has nothing in it? So the reason for that is because I don't actually want to reference in like my environment or my character rig directly. I kind of want to make a copy of each one of these, and we'll see why. I'm going to open my rigged character, and I'm going to save this as, and I'm going to put this one in the references folder, and I'm going to call this spray bottle ref or reference or whatever you want to call it. And I'm just going to save it, and I'm not going to give it a version number or anything. It's just going to be ref. And I'm also going to do the same or a similar thing with my environment. And I'm going to save this as, and this one will be called environment ref. And the idea here is that every time I make updates to my model of my character or of my environment, those can still have their own incremental versions. But every time I reach a new version of those that I want to bring into my other scenes, I will overwrite the reference file, and Maya will automatically load that in. And now we can see why. So if I go back and I open something I had before, like shot 1, it's not going to know where things are. So reference file not found. So it's still looking for spray bottle rigged version 3. So that's because I put things into subfolders, and until I tell it where those are at least once, it's not going to automatically find them. So tell it where that is, and then it seems like it actually, I only had to tell it where one file was, and then it seemed to be able to find the environment as well, which is pretty cool. But I'm going to go to File and Reference Editor, and you'll see if you click on any of these references that all it's looking for is the path, the file path of where this item actually is, and it's looking for this specific file name. So if I had this referenced in, and I then later went to make a spray bottle rigged VO4, I would have to manually go into every single shot and replace version 3 with version 4, and again, that could mess up my animation. It could delete my animation because it's considering it a new item that's being brought in, and it's just it's a lot of stuff to have in my scene word wise. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to replace this reference with the reference version, and now it's looking for the model And I'm going to replace this one with the reference version as well. And now, all I have to do anytime I make any updates to my environment or my character or any props that I have would be to overwrite this file, and I don't have to worry about replacing the file with a newer version in every single one of my scenes. And I could have upwards of like 20 or 30 scenes, depending on how much stuff is in my clip. So it's you want to keep your edit files separate from the one that's being brought into your scenes, basically, is what I'm getting at here. Okay, so in terms of layout, I'm not going to go too much over that, but if we look at, I showed this example if you're in my class. So we really just want to focus on cameras and composition for the layout. The animation can be very, very, very sloppy, and basically the animation can be considered a placeholder as well, just like some of the assets are. And of course, this is from a professional grade movie, and you can see how simplistic their assets are until they get past the layout stage, as well as the animation. So just as I'll do maybe like one shot as an example. Let me bring back my preferred setup here. So for shot 1, if I look back at my clip, which I keep accidentally closing because I get trigger happy with closing programs. So even just shot 1, it's just that. It's basically 1 second long. And it's just the camera's completely still, and it's the character going from a downward position and going up into a forward facing position. And if we look at the composition, there's about this much space and this much space on either side of this barrel. So that's what I can try and copy with my scene. And by the way, you don't have to use the camera with aim set up for every shot. If you I just did that because I think it's kind of fun, but not every shot needs to have that type of camera. The bottom of this barrel is cut off, so I want to mirror that as well. And one thing is that I may have to increase or decrease my focal length. So this actually looks like a pretty high focal length because everything seems pretty flat. Like this background seems like a pretty flat perspective rather than an exaggerated perspective. Actually, a lot of this movie seems to be shot with pretty high focal length. So the default focal length is, if I go on my camera, the default focal length is 35, so I might want to push this up to like 50. And I'll have to pull it back then. But that may be, if you can't seem to get your camera angle right, it may be not just that you don't have it in the right position, but it might also be that you don't have the right focal length for the type of shot. And I'm making some adjustments to this barrel, just in this one shot. So this isn't gonna apply to all my references, but we will have to keep that in mind. Again, because this is just a placeholder. So when I make the real environment, I can make it. I'll know what size it needs to be because I've already used this as an experiment. And in terms of, so my camera's not moving, so I don't have to animate the camera. But in terms of animation, my character starts turned down like this, and it doesn't matter what my like weight painting and stuff looks like below the object, because I'm not going to see it. So I can make my guy get all weird looking behind this barrel. And this only needs to be 24 frames. I typed that in the wrong one. This only needs to be like 24 frames because, as we saw, the shot is only like 1 second or thereabouts. So I could put a keyframe on here that's just basically like whoosh. No, I forgot that I moved this one, so I actually would have wanted to move that one first. Always move from the core upward or outward. And I don't have a prop, so I should have made a placeholder version of that prop as well before I started doing this, but I still have the ability. It's not like once I start I can't make the placeholder prop and save that out as a reference and everything as well. So that's literally all I'm going to do for this shot in terms of layout, pretty much. If I wanted to be really fancy with it, I could maybe at least put like an arc, a little bit more of an arc on this, or like a little bit of an overlap, just for funsies. That's it. All right. And, you know, I could go back in and put these arrows flying in, but I want to kind of crank out this whole thing pretty quickly. So I am going to, you know, save this and move on to shot 2 before I do any extra work, because I'm mostly concerned with getting the basic gist of the shot put in place than I am about getting every little detail. So I would recommend going through blocking out each shot or laying out each shot and putting in as many placeholder things as you need, and then maybe doing like a second pass if you have the time, and that'd be where, like, you know, where I put in some, you know, just some cubes or cylinders representing these arrows, and of course that prop that I'm missing. So yeah, and you know, everything in here would be a placeholder until I make the real version like I have with my current character in there. Alright, and then at the end, you would want to save out a playblast for each shot. So that'd be basically one playblast per Maya file, unless you are putting more than one shot in the same Maya file, which, as I said earlier, you are allowed to do if you decide it's wise. So I'd save that right here and use the best settings that you feel fit. Make sure, you know, put the scale up at 1, make it high quality, and oh, I do want to actually turn off my resolution gate when I do that. And I would go and put that in After Effects or Premiere or whatever you happen to be using to edit your thing together. Now, in terms of, I'm going to pause this for a second, and in terms of putting in your audio track for your scene, I'm going to show you how to do that real quick, although I just thought of it. I had it prepared earlier, but I'm going to pause my video for a second, and we will jump back in once I open the correct software. Oh, what is the hotkey for? Okay, so we're back here. What I did is I opened Adobe Media Encoder. If you don't have that, or you don't have access to it, you don't have to use that. You could do this in After Effects, but this is going to be a little bit more straightforward. So I'm just going to open up and add a source to my cue, and I'm going to bring in my movie clip. And really all I need to do here is change my type of export to something like a MP3 or a WAV file .wav, and I can put that, and I can save this into my sound folder. And technically I've already made a clip there, and I don't really need to care too much about the settings, but that's literally all I have to do. I can just change that and render it as a waveform or an MP3, and it already finished in half a second. So meanwhile, now I'm also I have After Effects open here. I have brought in that playblast I made earlier, and I don't have more than one shot made yet, but if we pretend that you brought in all of your playblasts from your layout after you make them, and pretend that all of these are not duplicates of the same movie clip and that they are in fact different playblasts. If I put them all in order, I can just then select them all and right click and say keyframe assistant sequence layers, and that will put them all in order with no gaps between. If you don't want to use After Effects, you don't have to for this, but that's what I'm just going to do. And I can also import my WAV file and bring that in to be my audio track. And now you don't want to include any audio in your playblasts. You want to put in the audio in your editing file, because there's plenty of things that can go wrong with putting audio in the playblasts, and sometimes it doesn't even work. And also you want it to be continuous in the edit file. You don't want it to, you don't want to have weird choppiness or gaps in between from having the audio embedded in the various playblasts. Now, speaking of which, one last thing for this video, as far as I can think of, is that now that I've saved out my audio clip, I can also use it for something else, which is I can put my audio into my Maya file in order to more accurately time out my layout. So if I just import and I go to my sound folder, I can bring in sorry, that's kind of loud, but now I can actually time out my my audio, and that's what I mean by don't save this out in the playblast. So make sure that the playblast doesn't have the sound in it. If you want to find your sound file, first of all, you can go into right click in here and say sound, and then select the clip and make sure that that's selected, and then you'll actually be able to see the waveform. But if you click the options, you can also go over here and do stuff like mute it, put an offset so it wouldn't start until a certain frame, change the, replace the clip, do yada yada yada. But that is going to make your life a lot easier as well. So actually, maybe there are no options about saving out the sound. Let's see. Okay, so the sound does appear in the playblast by default, which is a little annoying. But we could just check this to off before you save out your playblast. Either that, or if you forget to turn the sound off before you playblast, you could also just mute all of the layers in here by toggling off this speaker icon. So there's multiple ways of doing it. Anyway, that is about it for this little recap here of setting up your layout and getting your clip ready to use. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. It's already kind of long, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. Otherwise, that's going to be it for now. All right, good luck.